Amber Dawson, welcome to the show. I'm freaking pumped to have you here and dive into some fun stuff today. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And so, as we kick this thing off, I always love it if you could just start off and give the audience like an idea of what did life look like for little Amber as you were growing up. Like, what was your life like?
Well, there's so many mixed things in my life. So, my life, if I think about now at this point, in some ways I was very blessed, and in a lot of ways I was very blessed, and it was also very challenging. So, when I think back, there's like this me. I was really into martial arts. I have a secondary black belt in Taekwondo. I was on the national team for Team Canada. I was an excellent athlete. My grandmother lived with us for most of my life, which is a really unique feature, and I was very close with her. But all of the good things going on in my life was overshadowed by my little brother's addiction, who by the age of 13 was addicted to drugs and alcohol. And I had good parents, good middle class home. I was a good kid, but it didn't matter the competitions I won, the grades I brought home, the support we had in our home. Nothing could stop the power of living with an addiction. And so there's moments and glimmers of joy and happiness that are then overshadowed by, battles at airports, trying to go on a vacation that we never got to, having to leave the ski hill early, the justice system being involved, visiting my brother in secure treatment, wondering what I did wrong as a sister. And so I have when I go back, I have two competing visions of what my little life was like that are two very different realities. And then part of my job as an adult has been to make sense of the two worlds that I grew up in.
Dang, that I didn't expect that I didn't expect that. That's wild. I'm curious, you've in your life, in psychology has become a big part and the brain and the way you think and all of these things.
Yeah.
And you even kind of touched on it at the end there. You said part of your adult life has been making sense of those two different narratives.
Yes.
And I'm curious for you, what were those two narratives and how did you, I guess, come to peace with that? Because I think so many of us as we grow up, we have multiple different narratives that we really can't apply to our childhood, but it's such a beautiful way that you've worded it that we got to figure out how do we make sense of this narrative and how do we use it for our life in a positive way rather than a way, because I'm sure one of these narratives could have taken your life in a not positive way, but obviously you've done some beautiful things. So again, kind of what were the narratives and how did you make peace with those?
Yeah, so there's two competing ones. So, there's many competing narratives, but two kind of overarching themes. One is a narrative of a sister who hates her little brother. I loved my little brother and would have given anything in the world for him to be okay. He was the most important person in my life. And I hated him at the same time because you love someone that strongly and your life is in shambles, your family is in shambles. You can't also not hate them kind of at the same time. So there was such a competing drive in me. I would do backflips and, do whatever to try to make him okay.
Yeah.
But I've never been as mean to anyone in my life as I've been to him. And so we have a very complicated relationship, which today he, at my wedding, stood up. He was one of my bridesmaids at my wedding. And he stood up and said,
Let's go.
I used to hate my sister, but now, and that's how he started, so we have a very complicated relationship and we've always had a very complicated relationship. He would tell you that he loved me, but hated how perfect I was. And so we battled. And so a lot of my home life was very complicated. And as a result, I just tried to be self-sufficient, perfect, not need anything. And so I ended up in that own world feeling abandoned by my parents. But as a 6-year-old was already deciding I didn't need to be put to bed because my brother needed my parents and I didn't. And so, you start to, as a very young child, my brother's not even addicted yet, but there was difficulties going on in our lives that I had already known something was different and I just didn't want to be a problem. And so a lot of my life, there was pros and cons to that because the cons are I didn't have emotional needs met. I felt abandoned a lot of the time alone. On the other hand, I got to be really good at things. So there's pros and cons, but that's kind of the split of the two narratives, right? And so my family life was a bit of a wreck for a lot of the time. And I had it's complicated. In some ways, I had a really good family life. We went on vacations, we went to Disneyland, we got to ski, I had a roof over my head, I had good friends. But behind the doors, it was often lonely, tons of conflict, and just complicated. And so a major turning point in my life is my grandma lived with us for most of my life. on and off. We split grandma time. So my grandma lived with us for a week, and then my aunt for a week, and then us for a week, and then my aunt for a week. So we shared grandma till I was 19. And when I was 19, she decided to move full-time in with my aunt, which was the start of when my life kind of crumbled, because she was like my parent.
Yeah.
And so she was the light in my home. She was the person that nurtured and cared for me. She was stability. She was grace. Like, I felt like I could never do anything wrong in my grandmother's eyes. Yeah. But my brother and my mom, my dad, like, their eyes were elsewhere. And so my world changed the day she moved out of our home, because suddenly I had no ally. Suddenly I had no source of stability in my family home anymore. So there's all of that going on. And then when my brother turns, 16 is when his addiction. So he starts getting addicted around 13, but at 16, it really starts to spiral out of control. And so when I talk about the love-hate relationship with my brother, so I got him a job where I worked. I talked to my managers and I want to get him a job. Don't fire him. And the thing about my brother, he's an excellent worker. Like, he's a reliable, hard worker. He's interesting cat, but like a great worker, like personable, didn't used to be, but great worker. So, lots of drug, alcohol problems at work even, and they kept him on, and he stayed there. So we still had to work together. And that's why I talk about love, hate. Like, I loved him. I wanted him to be okay, but I couldn't also stand him. And in that time working together, we worked in a restaurant. So I bring him into this restaurant, and he's also getting exposed to older kids that are my friends, and he's partying with them. And it's very challenging because some of my friends, he's doing drugs with other of my friends that I spend time with. And then I'm like starting to hate all my friends. And it's this really challenging position. Totally. Around that time, my parents just needed so much support. We were in and out of rehabilitation centers. And right around that exact same time, I was asked to try out for national team Canada for Taekwondo, to go compete on the world stage.
And this is when you're around 19 years old?
I was like, I must have been about 20, I guess, in the timeline.
Okay, so grandma's no longer living there, though.
Grandma no longer lives there, yeah. But martial arts had still kind of been my thing. I've been doing martial arts since I was 6. I've been very good my whole life. Like, it was just one of those things where somehow in your life you pick something up, you're very good at it. I was very good at it from the day I started doing it. I practiced, but also there was a natural bit of my body just wanted to do martial arts. And so at the same time these things are happening, my grandma leaves, and I just latch on to martial arts harder. I just do more martial arts, basically. I'm doing martial arts 35 hours a week.
That was your new rock, basically.
Yeah. Going to school, doing martial arts. That's kind of the thing. And then like my world came crumbling down. I made Team Canada. So training 35 hours a week, I had to win Western Team Canada. And I did. So I had to win my division. So I came in first in Western Canada. Western Team Canada, I had to compete against Eastern Team Canada, and the top winners got to go to Worlds. So I won all of my divisions. I won my team division. I won my sparring division. I won my kata division, or it's not called kata in Taekwondo. Anyway, weird. I'm coming up with the wrong patterns. I won it all. And then right around the time my brother went into this long-term drug rehabilitation center that I had to participate in with my family for 9 months, Western Canada pulled out of the world stage. And so my coach decided I wasn't going. No, none of the athletes that made the team were going. And I didn't get to go. So at the same time, my brother goes into rehab. The thing that had been my rock, my saving grace, was no longer. And there I was, left with myself in family rehab with my brother. And it took a really long time to make sense of. And in the 2 months thereafter, I went on to gain 60 pounds in 2 months. My life was in shambles. I started basically school. I was lucky I had to withdraw off a bunch of classes. Lucky I got passing grades in the others. Yeah. And my life became a mess. But it was within that mess that it all, like, literally both my worlds collided. And it was like, a grenade had gone off in my life, and it was all dust and shrapnel and crap everywhere. And I couldn't find my way through it for a really long time. So long-winded way of answering your question, how did it come together? It came together when it fell apart.
And and I think, it's you hear a lot, oftentimes, that it's like when you're at rock bottom, it's where you can get a lot of answers, because you're like, all right, there's nothing, there's no going further down. It's only going up. It's like, let me create a new foundation here to build my life and to create something that excites me. And it's like all of the past experiences you have that may have, been like a slow ticking time bomb. They blew up. Now it's like, all right, how do I grab all those pieces that are all over the place now and put them together in a way that's actually beautiful, not this messy sort of thing that I've put together in my head that may not have been messy, but I put it together. The narrative I created behind it was messy. And so I guess for you, these two worlds explode more or less, right? I mean, I can only imagine you've been working towards everything for Taekwondo so much, 35 hours a week, and all of a sudden it's like ripped out from under you. And I can only imagine that. And then with your brother and your family, it's like, I mean, your head must have been spinning 10 million miles an hour. And so for you, I'm curious, as you found yourself in that kind of rock bottom place, how did you start to put those pieces back together and kind of find the direction in your life from that point?
Yeah, so it's many years of picking myself up off the bottom, climbing a bit uphill, and then sliding back down. Today, I'm in the most solid place, most directed place I've ever been. It took many, many trials, errors, lifts, falls back down to get here. And so in my story, you hear this one of feeling alone, feeling isolated, turning myself into sports or high achievement. And I did this at the expense of relationships. And so after going through treatment, I learned I liked it, and falling into how I am a psychologist today. But
this was going through it with your brother.
Yeah. Yeah. So then I started working at that treatment center later. And that's how I got into psychology. Someone there was like, why don't you go get your master's and I'll supervise you? And then I went on to become a psychologist. But that wasn't my plan before going through treatment with him.
Shout out to your brother. Who would have guessed that's how that came into your life?
Well, he's been the most important person in my life, through the good and the bad. And then for me, through all of this, my greatest struggle was relationships, because my family relationships were in shambles. My friendships were in shambles because my life was I was a chaotic disaster. And what I truly wanted in life was to be loved. And I didn't think that I was lovable, because I thought if I was good enough, I would finally be loved, but I was very good at many things and that didn't compute. And so I went in to do my degree in marriage and family therapy for the family therapy piece, because it made sense. I was doing family treatment for drug and alcohol, but what I found there was some real tools for relationships. And so what then subsequently, shortly thereafter happens, fall in love, get married, thinking I finally found love, but me and that man can't connect. And sure enough, I start finding alcohol bottles in the cupboards and in the laundry basket, and my life is replaying. I'm replaying in my marriage, but I replayed in my childhood. So I was only married for a short 10 months. But when I left that marriage, I had to take a real look and go, this is not the life I wanted. Like, what the heck is going on? I remember someone commented on my Facebook, you're a marriage therapist. How did you only get married for 10 months? And I was shattered. And I was like, and they're right. And all I wanted was to be loved and to be married and have that work. I really deeply wanted a secure and loving family. And that was when changed everything for me. I decided to take the education that I had learned through formal education and decide to practically implement it in my life to see if it would work. And that is now what has led me on this path to having the most loving marriage today that I could have ever dreamed of, and where I give back the most. So I'm a couples therapist of a relationship podcast, Relationships Like the Podcast. And the goal of that is to teach people what I needed to know when my family system, loving family, great intact family, who no one knows how to deal with a 13-year-old drug addict. You can have great parents, but that's a circumstance beyond most people's control.
For sure.
And so all I deeply want in life. And so now my passion has come from that deep need to be loved and wanting to give other people the tools to have that when they don't. When I didn't have it, I needed to rely on the research to figure out how to have it in my adult life.
Yeah. Yeah. I think two things that I'm kind of picking apart there that I think anyone listening to this can take is I think it's easy sometimes in life to find ourselves in a situation where we go, when I do this, I'll be loved, or when I accomplish this, I'll be loved, or when I do this, I'm going to be enough. And realizing that if that's the narrative in your head, even when you accomplish that thing, because that's the narrative in your head, there's going to be, okay, well then when I accomplish this, I'll be loved. And then you accomplish it, you go, well then I need to do that to be loved. And I think one of the most beautiful realizations is stop putting your love externally. That you need to find something outside to make you complete, or whatever it is, and find a way to love yourself without any of these stuff externally, right? And it's one of the most interesting things that I've ever seen. When you learn to love yourself first, the other things fall into place. Versus when you go, that external thing will bring me love, or that will make me feel enough. It's, you know, how can you love yourself more? How can you appreciate yourself? Whether it's, you know, daily gratitude for yourself, whether it's giving yourself hugs, whether it's like giving yourself a pat on the back. You know what I mean? Some of these things that people almost say is like silly, but it's like you really do have to make it a serious effort in your life to say, like, I love myself, and I'm gonna show that to myself every single day. Because if you don't, you know, you may find yourself in this kind of whirlwind again. And I think another thing that's just such a testament to you that everybody can take from this is a sensational desire to not take no for an answer. Right? And it's like this whole, you know, story of your life of you want to be loved, you want this life, this love, this relationship, all these things. You didn't, like, you got knocked down more than once, more than twice, more than a few times, but it was this ridiculous desire to say, you know what, like, I deserve this type of a life. And I just think, like, so much kudos to you for doing that. Thank you for sharing that message with everybody that's listening to this. You know, and just all the beautiful things that you started to create in your life because you weren't willing to settle. And I think too many people in today's world settle. They give up, you know, at some point, and they go, well, you know, maybe it's not meant to be. And it's, I think that's a bunch of hocus pocus, that it's meant to be whatever you want it to be, but you got to put in the work. Yeah.
Yeah. And just like, if anybody's hearing Stu say, like, you got to love yourself first, I also want to say, like, yes. And also sometimes it can just start with, like, recognizing you don't have to get that external validation anywhere. And I think if you would have told me, a younger me, that I'd love myself, I'd be like, no, thank you. I'm fine with no love. But I think even if you can get to that place where you're doing the gratitude, or you can get to that self-love, like, amazing. But if it even just starts with recognizing it doesn't have to come from anywhere else, or maybe, like, you're just enough, doesn't even have to be love. Like, it's just fine if you are what you are, if it feels too much of a leap to get to self-love. Because I think I would have felt like that was too big of a leap. But I think you don't need to prove it anywhere else. You don't have to get that from anywhere else. Like, as humans, we're wired for love and belonging, and you really don't need to do, you don't need to be wonderful. You don't need to be great. You just got to just be.
For real. So I'm curious for you then. So, you know, obviously you get into the family therapy, and you start to do some of that because your brother, and eventually you get into relationship, and it turns into this, like, whole beautiful thing that you've started to create in your life now, as living it and then also helping people get there. And I'm curious for you, like, what was the first step for you into this world? Like, as you realized, okay, relationship therapy in this world, I want to get into it. What was the first step on going from thinking that to, like, actually doing it?
Well, I was kind of doing it. Like, so because my degree was in marriage and family therapy, I had started doing a little family therapy. Couples therapy already, but it wasn't my primary focus. I think where I really started doing it was after I met my current husband, and I really liked him a lot.
Yeah.
I really,
good motivation.
Really liked him. Oh yeah. There's nothing more motivating than, like, a good bit of lust and, like, early falling in love. Yeah. And I started, he pointed out some of my unhelpful communication patterns and some of the things I was doing that was not so great, that was pushing him away. And I had a real choice to make. Like, either I can keep working to love this man who, like, I adored, or like I could make some changes, or I could lose him. And I knew that I needed to make some real changes to kind of have to keep the love that I was starting to experience with him. You know, although I thought there were many things he was doing wrong, I also intuitively knew that there was many things I was doing that was contributing to this as well. So in order to give our relationship the best shot possible, I really, really had to dive into the relationship research. And then as I got more into the relationship research, because I was already doing couples therapy. I don't know, the universe just gave me more couples. I don't know. They were like, you're being good at this. Why don't you have more couples? But I think then the more couples I saw, and the more I saw the science work, Or I was like, I just want to work with couples. I love this. I love helping couples. Like we all want to be loved, right? In different ways, shapes, form. Like we all want that. And so many couples, like we get together with these great intentions. We want it to be like the movies. We want that person's arms to feel like home. We want the person who's like words, like soothes our heartache, except we get it and it's good for a bit until it's not. And when I started to realize that I could help couples feel safe, feel connected, to have a peaceful, happy, long-lasting relationship, and could begin to experience what I found, I was like, I'm all in. Let's do this. If this works, cool. So then I started seeing more and more couples. And then over the pandemic, I decided to start my own practice. And I was like, well, you have to niche down to something. What do you want to do? And my easy answer was relationships. I love relationships. I love being in a relationship. I love thinking about relationships. I love helping relationships. I just like love relationships. So it was a really easy answer to want to just help in that direction.
So what would you say then, after working with so many people in relationships and loving doing this, what would you say are like some of the common challenges that you see people face in a relationship, I guess?
Communication. So like, obviously this is a sweeping overgeneralization, but it's a generally true generalization. So in like heterosexual relationships, as an overgeneralization, most men prefer not to have conflict. They typically stonewall in arguments. So they emotionally shut down, convey disapproval or displeasure, or they disengage. That's typically what most men do. And most women prefer to talk things out. They want to have the conversation. And so this is through our socialization. If you look at little boys and little girls on the playground, many little boys are pushing each other off the monkey bars, and little girls are talking and sitting around in a circle. So we have much different gender socialization. And then all of a sudden you get together with someone who you quite adore, but you have two radically different communication styles. We both go through, 12 years of education, maybe even some university, maybe even, some after, some professional development. And like, where'd you get your course on communication? I didn't get one. It wasn't until my third year of a psych degree where I actually had a course about how do you talk to people. And it wasn't until my master's degree where I actually had to start talking to people. And so, we're set up in such as through no one's fault, like zero people's fault. We all think we're right in our own head though, and if our partner would just do the other thing, but most of us don't have any training in it. And I think just communication and how we relate to each other is just quite different. And certainly you have the women that stonewall and the men that want to talk things out, for sure. That happens. But like the biggest thing is couples just don't really know how to connect. At the beginning of a relationship, we do. We're flooded with dopamine and serotonin and oxytocin, and we're in lust. It's so easy to do it then. And then as the passage of time happens, those hormones go away. We're like, well, now what? What do I do with you now? So, I just think communication. So if I were to go through, when I meet with someone, I ask them, I have a form, and they have to put in what's the number one reason they come to therapy. If I were to go through 100 of them, I'm sure 90 of them say communication is the number one problem. And then within those, so most couples fight about very predictable things. There's quite predictable things that most couples fight about, but the topics that are most likely to get the biggest emotional kind of blow ups are communication, sex, finances, and parenting. Those are the ones that usually have big blow ups, but other things are like in-laws, holidays, expectations, how you spend your free time, housework. Housework's a big one. So there's just so many topics that quite often.
So how would you say couples can start communicating better? Is it, obviously overgeneralization, but is it men stop stonewalling and women start stonewalling, or what?
Yes and no. So the Gottmans, which are couples therapists and researchers, and John Gottman and Julie Gottman from the Gottman Institute have pointed out what they call the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and they're very, very bad for relationships. And so they are: 1, criticism. So pointing out a flaw or personality defect in your partner, like you're so lazy, you've left your shoes at the door. We have contempt, which is insulting, talking to your partner with an air of superiority, abusing. You're so lazy, you've left your shoes at the door. What do you think I am, your maid? You're just like your father. We have defensiveness, which is warding off an attack, counterattacking, playing innocent victim. No, I didn't leave my shoes by the door. The dog must have put them there. And what do you care anyway? You leave your shoes by the door. And then we have stonewalling. which is the emotional disengaging and walking away. So these are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And I think one of the first things to note is if you are doing these, just start to pay attention. Ooh, am I doing this? It's the number one thing to like stop doing. And so that's a stop doing. And then I have a start doing. So many people, when they try to get their partner to see things their way, is they just try to persuade right away, or they try to get their partner to agree with them or point out where their partner is wrong. And if you can remember to engage in listening and hearing your partner and demonstrating you've heard them to their satisfaction before you try to persuade them of something else, your conversations are going to go a lot better. So most of us, we hear something, we try to point out where they're wrong or disagree. and most of us, like, it doesn't go very well. So if you think about in your life, who you've been able to take a different view from, it's probably someone that also valued your view. It's probably someone that made you feel respected and important, even if you disagreed. So we can communicate that to our partners by just listening first, getting all the information, and communicating it back to their satisfaction, not ours. So don't interpret, don't judge, don't think about what you think about what they're saying. Just summarize it back to them, reflect it back to them as accurately as possible. If you can, validate or empathize with something they've said. Like, oh, it makes sense. You're frustrated that the shoes are at the door. Yes, irritating, before going on to your position. And I think a lot of people, I like this quote, I don't know who says it, the single greatest illusion in communication is that it's actually happened. So a lot of the time we know we have listened to our spouse, but our spouse doesn't know. They don't know that you've been heard first. So just communicate it back, summarize back first before moving on.
I love that. Like, genuinely, truly listen. Don't try to create an argument or a rebuttal or anything. It's just like, listen, understand. And then once you've fully done that 100%, then come with whatever's on your thoughts.
Exactly. So what Stu just did was the perfect modeling for what I just suggested to do. Yes, exactly that.
Okay, cool. So I'm curious, in doing some research on you, one of the things you said on your website is like you've had the not so good relationship, and now you've learned this way to create, if I get the words right, creating a love, like the love of your wildest dreams is what you've created. And so I'm curious, like, is there a formula? Is there a formula maybe to cookie cutter or whatever, but like, are there keys you see to really creating, the love of your wildest dreams? Does it come all down to communicating and, applying these 4 things that you've said, or are there other things you've seen to really creating that love of your wildest dreams?
Well, I think there's so many things that gone into it. So like part 1 is when I met this man, he just lit up my soul. And so I think that there's some people that you meet them and you connect and you spark, and it's amazing. So the start was easy. Like the start in most relationships, the start is easy. Then it wasn't easy anymore. And so that's where I hit the relationship research. And so yes, it's avoiding those 4 horsemen. Absolutely. I mean, that is one of the key things to work on. It's listening first, like really being a good listener. And like, I do this all day for a living, and it's hard to do sometimes. When I stop doing it, I go downstairs and I become a real person. And then sometimes I don't get, he gets me after I've listened all day. So I'm not always my best self. So I have to remember to listen to him too. The relationship research. So the Gottmans, again, they have what they call 6 small things often that couples can focus on. That's about 6 hours a week. That has been shown in the longitudinal research that happy couples do just kind of spontaneously, that they figured it out. So they're little things like departures. So when you say goodbye to your partner in the morning, you say goodbye with like a kiss or a hug, or you actually say goodbye to them. And if you can, you remember something about their date, like, oh, hope your meeting with so-and-so goes great at 4 today. Let me know how it goes. So you remember something. It's just a quick goodbye that takes 2 minutes. Yeah. It's 5 minutes a day of touching, physical contact, nurturing touch. So this could mean sex, but it doesn't need to be. So it could mean snuggling on the couch, holding hands, touching your partner as you walk by them. It's 5 minutes of expressing fondness and admiration. So this is, thank you for taking the dishes out of the dishwasher, or gosh, you look cute in that shirt, or, you always make me feel safe. So it's using those kind words, those enduring words, just showing that you value and appreciate each other. So maybe go get someone a car wash, or you do the vacuuming for them. Like, who knows what it is, but it's showing your care. Yeah. What have I gone through? We have reunions. So that's at the end of the day when you finish your work day. How are you reconnecting? So you're talking about your days, you're sharing, you're being interested in what your partner has to say. Even if you don't know what they do, you're still getting that update on their inner world. So that's 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week kind of thing. What's the other one? We have what they call the State of the Union. I like to call this addressing issues, but where you sit down and you run the business of your relationship once a week. And so you talk about what's not gone well, what's gone well, is there anything that needs to be addressed? You don't have to ruin like a fun date moment with talking about the kids' school bus, or like that you forgot to unload the dishwasher when you said we could have your date, and you know that on your business meeting of your relationship, you'll address it then. So you don't have to ruin every moment with something that's going wrong. And then the other thing is date nights. So a time away from distractions, away from whatever else, where you reprioritize each other and you focus on that connection. And so my husband and I have these things in the back of my head, and I try as much as possible in our relationship to show up as his wife and not his therapist. And people always joke like, oh, what's it like to be married to you? And people ask him like, what's it like to be married to her? I don't therapize my poor husband. Like, he is my husband and I'm a person. But one of the pros and cons of being married to me is I have all these things in my head. Totally. And so we used to just naturally fell into a rhythm where I would come from work, I got home from work later, and then we'd, sit and talk about our days for 5 minutes and we'd part. One of the things we struggled with at the start of the pandemic is we're both home all the time. Well, then what did we do? How did we reconnect? Because we started to really miss our natural departures and reunions that were just really worked into our day. And so we made a conscious practice at the start of the pandemic to, at the end of our work days, to sit down on our couch and talk about our work days. It was only 5 minutes. We didn't do the 20 minutes, but as if we weren't there, and oh, what did you do today? And who did you talk to? Even though we lived in 600 square feet, we could hear each other. We've since moved and we have much more than 600 square feet, but so we had to do some of that readjusting. We are very, we both are quality time people. That really matters to us. So we might not do a true date night every week, but when we do a date night, it's at least a couple times a month, and we tend to go away for a weekend or do like a big sporting thing for the weekend. So that tends to be more of what we do. So we don't follow it exactly. The way that we do conflict, at this point, we have very little conflict. So we don't typically need to sit down and go through things as much, but we used to have conflict that we needed to sit down and go through. But we have an understanding of now how we bring up issues. It doesn't need to be weekly anymore, but it just, these kinds of things, they become rituals. And so the long lasting, happy relationship have these little rituals of connection. And so I walk into our relationship saying what are the things we should be doing? And I just make sure we're kind of ticking those boxes, we're doing them. And then we just have those rituals, and they're important to us both. And we know at 9 o'clock, 9 to 5, we sit down to dinner because I work late. And then when that's done, then we watch a show and we go to bed every night. And that's our ritual. That's how we connect.
Nice.
And so it's just these little small things often is what you want to think about. It doesn't have to be these big things. You don't spend tons of time together. It's the little ways you stay connected. So I think if I was thinking about for other couples, is there a formula? A loose formula? Yes. It's called The Small Things Often. I have it actually as a freebie on my website. It's called 6 Small Things Successful and Loving Couples Do. And I do have it as a download, so I can give you the link and then you can share it with people. And it goes off for how many minutes you have to do those things for and what those 6 things are. And so, like I said, you don't have to do them exactly in that formula in your relationship. You can adapt it to your relationship. Like my husband and I adapt it to ours. But I think just having that knowledge in my head has helped direct me to where do we need to work on, especially at the start of the pandemic. We had to reestablish all of our rituals because all of the good ones we had went astray. That was really helpful for me to rely back on.
Yeah, I love that. And perfect segue as well. I was going to ask you, obviously we're wrapping up here, and I'm curious if people want to get more info on you, see what you're up to. Obviously we'll put the link for the 6 steps. We'll put that in the show notes, but in general, if people want to see what you're up to and what you're doing, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah. So Instagram at Ember, EMBER, Relationship Psychology, or my podcast, Relationship Psych. Those would be the 2 best places to hear more from me.
Perfect. And we'll put all that in the show notes. And so last question I have for you, a question we ask every guest because we want to help you find direction, but do it through action, is what would you say is one thing someone listening to this can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start finding direction in their life?
It's a great question. So I'm going, if you're driving, don't do all of this. Keep your focus and your attention to what you're doing. I just want to get you to tune in because I think I want to take just through something I do for myself. So I'm just going to lead us through that now. So what I do with myself is I literally have an audio of my own voice recorded to myself. But I'm now going to take you through what that sounds like. So here we go. Yeah. So I say to myself, okay, Amber, sit comfortably in your chair. Take a big, deep breath in. Take a big, deep breath out. Big, deep breath in. Big, deep breath out. I want you to breathe in lightness and confidence. Breathe out stress, anxiety, and overwhelm. Breathing in, breathing out stress, anxiety, and overwhelm. And I want you to just connect back into your body. You know who you are. You know where you want to go. You know what is important to you. And I want you to identify and prioritize the one thing you need to do today to move you closer to your goals. And I want you to get really clear on what today's one action is. And I want you to figure out when you can complete that one action. And if there's anything else coming to your mind, I want you to think in your mind's eye when you can write it down to the other thing. But I want you to focus on that one idea today that's going to move the needle you need to do. And I want you to imagine yourself completing that to-do item. I want you to imagine how you feel when it's done. And I want you to take another big, deep breath in. Breathe out. And breathe in ease and confidence. And then breathe out. And then just bring your awareness back to your room. And then I know what I need to do.
I love that.
It's about finding and reconnecting to myself. And then so I'm like a busy person. I vibrate. I'm all over the place and I've got 50 things going on and I have 25 goals.
Ditto.
That's the kind of person I hate slowing down. It's awful. But when I can slow down and get in touch with myself, I know what the next right thought is. I know what the next right action is. And I know what the next thing I need to do is. And so for me, it's about slowing down for just 1 or 2 minutes. I hate meditation. This is like a meditation we just did here. Yeah. But it's giving myself the space to slow down and identify and prioritize what is the next right thing that's going to move the needle. So that's what I would suggest to people. Slow down, check in. What are your goals? I mean, you might need to figure out what your goals are first, but then identify and prioritize what is the next one thing that will move the needle. If I need to do that many times throughout the day, I will. Yeah. But my to-do list can be 50 items long. I'm not going to do 50 things. That's overwhelming. One thing. Sometimes I'll do 3, but 1 to 3 things. What can I do? That's it. So there you go. Now you have it. Now you know what I do. In the audio of my own voice is what I listen to.
For real. That is so cool. And I love, how you have it recorded and you can just put it on play and it just, I mean, I was closing my eyes in that experience and it was really calming, peaceful, and then also gives you a lot of clarity. So I absolutely love that. I think everybody needs to go re-listen to that and make your own version of it as well, so you can start to get that clarity. So one more time, Amber, I just want to say thank you so much for being here today. I've truly enjoyed it. You have such a beautiful and wonderful story of your life, and thank you for sharing it here with us today and just truly adding so much value. So thanks for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you. It's been so much fun. And you're a delightful interviewer as well. And you ask wonderful questions. So thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you.